There's only so many things that actually make you above $1,000 an hour when it comes to working in this business. You have a dependency on things that are outside of your control,
Yep.
right? It's sort of just like you wake up and then you're just like, I hope somebody calls on the sign today. That can be a pillar. I believe it should be. I'm a big proponent of like, yeah, sure. Like, if you're going to list a bunch of properties, you might as well make sure to do whatever you can to not only get the sign calls, but convert them, which you're doing a fantastic job of. So I want to give you some kudos because that's great. I'm not telling you to stop. Right. So everything I say to you now and for the future is never to stop what's currently working. So you're going to continue doing that. And obviously we can work on ways you can even enhance your conversion ratio on the sign calls. But that's going to be one pillar, right? So referrals is another pillar, right? So it's like you can't spend zero time on referrals, right? Like obviously you have a BNI group and you're going to meet these people once a week. I've done BNI many years ago. So I'm very familiar. But at the same time, it is like a business. Like spending time with people and purposely setting up the meetings and the calls and going through the whole process and then ensuring you always are asking, hey, how can I support your business? And hey, do you happen to have someone that you can refer me within the next 30 days so we can do some business together, right? That is also going to be something I tell you that you should be time blocking sign calls. You should be time blocking referrals, and you should be time blocking prospecting. Now, prospecting, I don't think should just be cold calling. Now, again, my team does about 250,000 cold calls a month as of now. So, cold calling for us is a much larger block of leads. That's where the majority of our business comes from. However, every single one of our agents also has a warm network. I have a warm network. You have a warm network. So I'm not saying spend zero time on your database that you've already, your phone book, but it's scheduling time for these things because like you and I were just mentioning, if a sign call comes in, you make how much percent?
So I'll typically make 40%, or no, that's the whole deal. So I'll typically do, if I get a sign call at our listing and I close that, I'll get 75% of the tenant side and call it 30% of the landlord side.
Got it. Okay. So I'm just going to, okay. I'm going to just say 30% of that. That's what I'm saying. Like the 30% of that.
Okay.
30% of that deal. And then obviously if that person then goes off to do something, you said 70%, correct? The vast majority of the deals you're closing are leasing, or is it, got it. Is it 100% leasing?
No, it's not 100% leasing, but I'd say it's probably close to that 90%.
And the goal obviously is to get more into investment sales, correct?
Yes.
What I'd like to even kind of think about is in last year, before I just get really into this, what was the total GCI you earned last year?
110.
110. Love it. I mean, look, 110K just doing mainly leasing is not bad, right? Especially in Colorado. And this is what you said.
It's not terrible. And also, like, that's what I collected that year. That's not
total
what we closed that year.
Yeah, I mean, you probably closed 400K.
I mean, maybe not that close, but
so I'm saying 300, 400K, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The bigger deals always take longer for us to get paid on.
For sure. I understand that. Long story short, the way I think about your type of business here is that you're going to have these 4 different pillars, right? You're going to have sign calls, referrals, the warm / sphere of influence, and then you're going to have the cold calling, right? Now, every single one of these, no matter what you do, I don't care if you add anything else to this list, whether it's mailers, it's paid advertising, it's billboards, it's anything, okay? Every single thing that you could possibly add to a lead generation list of things that you could be doing have 2 different sides of the coin. Number one, it's the quality of lead you're generating, right? And the both on the motivation side, right? And the actual time horizon of that person, right? So, because if you're hypothetically doing, let's just say, a warm sphere of influence, right? If you're calling through your contact book, like you have to hope and pray that somebody else is connected to somebody who's already had a conversation, had a conversation with, maybe can open up the next door, but you're still 2 degrees of separation. You need to make sure that next person picks up the phone. It's not just perfect situation. Same thing with referrals. Obviously sign calls has a lot of pros because typically the decision maker is the one calling you, at least the majority of the time. And from there, they also have a decent level of motivation because they're randomly calling you on an available space. So they're obviously somewhat motivated to do something. So when you're cold calling or you're making a warm sphere of influence call, obviously the level of motivation and the quality of that lead might be a little bit lower, for sure, right? I can understand, why, you quote unquote felt like it wasn't working. But these are things that you can't not do during the week, because what's going to happen is that if hypothetically something random happens, okay? Again, not to try to be morbid, but just to try to go to extremes. Your mentor passes away unnecessarily. Your company randomly shuts down, right? Like you are at risk because of the dependency you have for this. And then you're going to have to go into another situation and hope and pray that they also have a decent setup like you have now. I always like to say, my intention for everyone is that we get you to a place where the majority of your business is always self-gen, right? Because then there is a very low dependency on other sources coming to you, right? It's just a plus. The goal here is now to say, great, if you're going to spend, let's just say 30 minutes to, like, how much time could you dedicate to just sign calls, just returning sign calls?
I mean, it just kind of like happens during the day. I guess, I get a call. I'm on my way to an appointment. I answer the call.
These don't get logged in a book that you're following up with?
Not very well, no.
Okay, got it. So these are literally just a phone call that gets routed to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, somebody's driving by my sign or they find me on LoopNet. They call me. We schedule them on the calendar. And then
So then what I would do is, so you're not really even going to be time blocking for that much more than maybe during your follow-up hour. You're also going to then continue to try to get a hold of people that you've spoken to in the past on follow-up, on Zoom calls. Okay. Referrals. You have a BNI 1 day a week in the morning, right? I'm imagining. I would imagine that then I would probably spend somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour per week outside of that BNI working the relationships you're already building. Correct. One-on-ones, coffee meetings, whatever you want to call them. Okay?
Yep.
Spend an hour a week on that. Probably not necessary to do much more unless you have dozens of great people to network with, which I doubt is the case. You can do 2 30-minute meetings a week. I mean, that's plenty. Warm sphere of influence and cold calling. I want you to think about it like this. You have, from what time do you get to the office / could start doing any productive work?
7 a.m.
At an absolute minimum, you have from literally 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd say to start prospecting, right? 8 o'clock in the morning, because most people in real estate are probably awake, till probably 1 p.m., where this is non-negotiable prospecting time. Nothing else occurs. This is not for showings. This is not for admin. This is not for anything other than outbound, you specifically, on the phone, outbounding to try to generate leads. And the reason why I love doing investment sales and having that be the focus for your phone call, because one of the pivots in the conversation, if they don't want to sell, is what?
Turning them into a
buyer, or I was even going to say 90% of your business is leasing. Well, I was like leasing. I'm saying
leasing.
So that's all right. So I'm saying you have this ability where you can be like have the focus in your head is investment sales. I'm going to try to sell their property. That is the goal. However, not everyone says yes, obviously. And then you can immediately pivot to buyer, leasing, management, even, right? Like there's a lot of pivots in that conversation. Is why I love investment sales, because you have so many freaking options that like there's a way that you can transact with almost anybody. This is why you always start the conversation with, would you be totally against selling a property? Now, obviously you can use several different scripts. I have the script book, which I don't know if you downloaded yet, but so you can use that, but that's going to be your focus. You're not calling for like trying to lease their or list their property for a lease. That's not the intention of the call. If it goes that route, great. Sure, we take it. But always initial is to sell. And then you can pivot from there. Think about it like this. $1 per hour, there's only so many things that actually make you above $1,000 an hour when it comes to working in this business. What do you think they are?
Prospecting for investment sales.
Great. Prospecting, just in general. Prospecting is number one. I agree. What else? Number two is negotiating a deal. Okay, negotiating. Anytime you're in the negotiations, getting somebody to put pen to paper to sign a letter of intent of any sort.
Yep.
So prospecting, negotiating. I like to say there's 4 things essentially. Okay. Next one is meeting with clients. So if you want to count that as consulting, but meeting with a client face to face. Now I want to be very clear about this because I'm like people sometimes mix this up. I am not talking about touring a building. That's not $1,000 an hour job. I have, and I currently do, pay people about $25 an hour to tour properties for me. I don't tour it. My buyer doesn't need me to hold their hand and point at the ceiling heights. They don't need you to do that. I like to be the surgeon. I walk in to do just the surgery. That's it. I'm not doing your intake form. I'm not getting you prepped. I'm not, making sure all my freaking, the scalpels are clean. I'm not making sure everything's done before I walk in. I'm not even the one putting my gloves on. I got somebody who does that for me. I want to just be the surgeon who gets paid just for literally the second I walk in the door and the second I walk out the door. That's it. That's why you have support. Now, don't get me wrong, at the beginning of your career, you're going to do showings. You're going to do other things. But I want you to think in your head, this is not $1,000 an hour activity. Because a lot of brokers in the beginning of their career are like, oh, I'm touring a property. This is great, right? Like, we're moving towards, that is part of the process, but you have to spend majority of your time in the $1,000+ an hour side of the business. right? Because there are dozens and dozens and dozens of tasks that we do as brokers. But like, just like drafting a letter of intent, that's not $1,000 an hour activity, but you can get really giddy that you're writing up a letter of intent for 10 million bucks. But like, sure, that has to be done, but that act is not $1,000 an hour, right? $1,000 per hour. I have VAs who do that. I just created an AI software that does it automatically for us. So it's like doing those specific activities. You just need to be careful where you look at your 10-hour day, you start working at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then you go till 4, 5, 6, 8, whatever it is, in your day, how much of that time was actually spent on the $1,000 an hour activities. Now, the last thing I was going to say is managing money, by the way. That's the fourth activity, managing your cash. Managing cash. Prospecting, negotiating, meeting with clients, and managing cash. That's it. As a individual agent, this is what makes you the most money. Now, obviously, once you build a team, there's going to be other things that you can add to that. But for right now, these are the only things I want you to think about. If you're not doing one of these 4 activities, I want you just to think mentally, put your hands up and go, it's not my job. It's not my job. Now, again, I'm not saying I don't do things that it's like they say, like, well, the CEO has to also, be prepared to do any job. I agree. But at the same time, mopping the floors does not pay me money, right? So it's something I might do, but I need to be careful about when I do it. Right. So I might do mop the floors at 9 o'clock at night because I can't do my other activities. Does that make sense? I might draft my letters of intent at 8 p.m. at night because it doesn't pay me $1,000 an hour. I might do my marketing activities at night because it doesn't pay me $1,000 an hour. So during your working hours, you do the things that pay you most and spend the most time you possibly can on those activities. So everything else, like all of the showings, what I typically have our agents do is they do all showings after 3 p.m. And I just say, blame the landlord, blame the seller. Seller's not available. No one's available to be there. Because guess what you should be doing between 8 o'clock in the morning and 3 p.m.?
Prospecting.
100%. And you can be prospecting till 1 o'clock minimum in the afternoon. And by the way, is it mundane? Yes. Does it make you a lot of money? Yes, it does. So it might be slower, right? Because it's not a sign call where you get so you're so excited because this person's actually motivated. It can be, it's not a guaranteed deal, but the process is a little slower for sure, but it's no longer where you have the dependency. Remember, back in the very, 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 very long time ago, there were hunters and gatherers, right? Like if you were not a hunter and you were just somebody who sat back and maybe, like the women who would watch the children back in the day, right? If no one got food, they would starve. Right? That dependency is scary. Being in this industry, you need to be the one who has zero dependency. Whether you get a sign call or not, any day of the week, any day of the month, you're still going to do X amount of business because you have your own business that you're generating. So then now let's shift things. So I'm going to break this all down now into actual digestible things to do, okay? So from 8 a.m., do you do a daily team meeting every day? By yourself or with your mentor? I would just recommend no matter what, at 8 o'clock in the morning, or even beforehand. I mean, if you're getting to the office at 7 o'clock, great, do it beforehand. But it's not meant to be a long meeting, but I would recommend everyone, even if it's just by yourself, you have a meeting. Now, this meeting is going to be red flags. Red flags are always first, which is something that has to be done before you start hitting the phones. This is like a deal's falling apart and I need to call a client. Someone said termination letter, I got to call a client. My seller called me 19 times last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got to call a client, right? Anything that's like absolute something's on fire, or you have a super hot lead that needs to be followed up with and they're ready to do something right freaking now, that's a red flag. A red flag could also be, I had a guy who, I got an email last night that they're willing to accept an offer. I submitted an LOI, they're going to accept an offer. That's a red flag. I have to get a hold of that guy saying he's going to accept the offer. I need things signed right freaking now, right? That's red flags. Next is pipeline review. So your pipeline review, pretty obvious. You're going to look through every single listing and every single deal under contract and make sure everything is moving along smoothly. There's going to be always something that comes up oh, we haven't heard back from this attorney yet. What's going on, right? This deal's been sitting in attorney review for way too freaking long. Who do I have to call? This is the whole purpose of pipeline review is for you to come up with who on planet Earth needs a touch by me or the transaction manager. I don't know if you have a TC. Do you have a transaction manager?
Oh, yeah, we do.
You do. Okay. So by the way, I would even have your TC on the phone with you. So every day you could even just say what time in the morning would be best for a pipeline review. Every day you do a pipeline review. It's not a once a week thing, not a once a month thing. This is every single freaking day. Hey, can I have 10 minutes of your time a day? Right? I don't need much more, but I just want to kind of get a gauge so nothing ever feels like it's not moving. And the last thing you're going to do is just come up with a today's to-do list, right? So this is where I review my hottest leads. I review anything from yesterday that did not get completed. right? So very quick to-do list. I don't like to-do lists, but like something short, sweet, you can get it done like ASAP. The whole purpose of this meeting should be 15 minutes at most, okay? For all of this, for every one of these points. And you're reviewing this every single morning, as early as you possibly can do it, where again, you have a TC manager where I would recommend they're on the line. You review this with them and you get exactly what needs to be done today. Like, okay, now you're clear-headed. You're like, got it. This needs to be done today. Understood. Now, you're going to give yourself, from this moment, less than 30 minutes to complete every item on this list. So I'll give you an example. I do our team meeting starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. My 8 a.m., let's just say my 8 a.m. finishes. My team members will then spend the next 30 minutes before, they have until 9 o'clock in the morning, basically, is the way I kind of have it set up with them. Before 9 a.m. hits, when they have to be on the phone prospecting, you know, they can get on the phone beforehand, but they have to handle every single one of their red flags, every single thing from the pipeline review, and every single thing from like their to-do list first. Get it out of the way. Get it done, especially your red flags. Just get it done. Whatever email you need to send out, whatever phone call needs to be made, whatever needs to be handled like ASAP, just get it done. Because this way by 9 o'clock, you've already handled everything that you're going to be thinking about. So you don't have to worry about and push it. Like, don't push it off. Just get it done. You have 30 minutes. Just put up, I'm not even kidding you. My guys will put up a timer on their phone, 30 minutes, go. This is not to answer phone calls. This is just specifically to handle your thing. Now, obviously, if you call somebody and they immediately call you back, answer the phone. I get it. But, you know, this is not to be interrupted time. This is do not disturb. You're making your calls and that's it, right? Like you're getting whatever needs to be done, done. Now 9 o'clock rolls around and then from 9 o'clock till 1 o'clock, same exact concept, but for prospecting. Now it's just outbound, 4 hours every single day. Now, I'd say this kind of adjusted to somebody's business, where right now, I would tell you that 4 hours is a bare minimum. Until you're making 400 G's a year, 300 G's a year, like net, you should be doing this minimum 4 hours a day. Because the goal here is that you start off like I mean, dude, I was doing 10 hours a day when I started, right? It was just hammering phones, and I wasn't even that great at it, right? And so I would do all this prospecting, because what would happen is that all of a sudden now the pipeline starts to build, right? Because I didn't want to wait so long for my pipeline to build, so I was doing 10 hours. But you build up this pipeline, you start closing some deals, and eventually what happens is that you don't have to do 4 hours of calls anymore after your first probably a year or two of doing this. But I just want you to think in your head, like Monday through Friday, sometimes even one day, Saturday or Sunday, 4 hours a day, right? Especially being in your position in the business, right? Like if you really want to start hitting, like I think your goal is 500K, dude, 4 hours a day, every single day. I'd even tell you 6 or maybe 7 days a week. Okay. Now, obviously I say some people are religious. You want to take a Sunday off for, you know, the church or Saturday off for Shabbat, whatever you're doing, but it's fine. What I say, at least somewhere around 6 days a week, right? Especially if you want to make 500K a year. Now, again, and by the way, for that mentality, I would say I'm going to do this until I make 500 grand a year. It's not like I'm going to do 4 hours of calls for 6 months. It's like, no. I'm going to do this until I'm making 500 grand a year. Then it can drop down to 3 hours, 5 days a week. Like I still prospect. You see me doing the live streams. It's not like I don't prospect. I still prospect. That's until around 1 o'clock. Now, obviously I can tell you, you can go longer, but I would recommend the following. So you go to 1 p.m. Always have lunch at home, like or at the office, right? I always get food delivered wherever I'm at. Then you have the 1 to 3 p.m. time. What do you think you should do during this period of time? Now, obviously, I'm specifically talking investment sales for a second. I'm not talking just leasing. Between 1 and 3 p.m., what is this? What is this time for?
Lead follow-up.
Great. So a part of it, yes, 100%. 30, like based on your pipeline and your database, it's going to be somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour of follow-up every day. You're going to go through whatever needs to be followed up on. Again, 30 minutes to an hour. But I mean, like based on your database size, 2 hours doesn't make any sense. Like I spend, for me, because I have 70,000+ people in my database, I spend probably 2 to 3 hours a day on follow-up because I spend maybe an hour or two a day on lead gen. But like, I don't need to generate infinitely more leads every day, like me personally. I need to be doing a lot more time on the follow-up side. It's like this, you know, I always say it's like a bell curve, right? Like at the very beginning of your career, you're going to have infinitely more time on lead gen and a little bit less time on prospecting, and then it'll eventually switch. For right now, 4 hours that, then you're going to do about an hour or 30 minutes to an hour on follow-up, okay? The following hour, now you're 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What do you do for the last hour?
The last hour before the showings?
Before showings begin, correct.
I don't know. What are you doing?
So this last hour is all for pitching deals. So this is you prospecting in the morning, or for the past couple weeks, and you've generated a couple off-market opportunities. You already mentioned you had a dozen or so, or half a dozen opportunities of people who might want to sell their property, right? You now need to get offers on these properties, correct? So I spend that period of time pitching deals to buyers. Because while you're prospecting, like we just said originally, right? You're going to call somebody and they go, no, Eric, I don't want to sell my property. You're like, okay, great. Would you, just out of curiosity, is your building 100% occupied? Yeah, it is. Okay, well, now it's not going to be leasing. Now you're going to pivot again to a buyer. Well, I can completely understand, John, you don't want to sell your property. It's 100% occupied and you're probably making some great money. But I am totally curious if another property similar to the one here at 123 Main Street came available local to this property, right? Would you be totally against taking a look at possibly buying it? Yeah, I own 6 other properties in town. I'd love to possibly buy another one. Sure. What do you got for me? That person is going to be on a buyer's list. And then during that last hour of your time, which I would even stretch to sometimes it's an hour and a half, and sometimes if you have no showings, you're either going to be pitching more deals and trying to get more offers, or you're going to be back on the phones generating more sellers. And that's the process over and over again. It's the same thing every single day for every one of my agents, including myself. Because like for us, I try to tell my team, I want you to generate 2 seller leads a day. No, they don't have to be unfreaking believable, but 2 people who would like to sell their property that are new individuals you've never spoken to before every day. And you want to try to get 1 written offer per day. So how do you do that? Well, you got to spend a lot of time prospecting. And you got to spend enough time on the phone pitching deals to buyers who are qualified and looking for that type of product to try to get 1 offer a day. Now, following that mentality, now listen, sometimes you're not going to get an offer a day. It's fine, right? Sometimes you're not going to get 2 leads a day, but trying to have that as a mental average on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, quarterly basis, where you're averaging roughly that, which is again 40 seller leads a month, which again don't all have to be unbelievable, but 40-ish seller leads a month, and 20 offers written and submitted. Now, again, you're not going to get accepted on all of them, clearly. But that mentality, any agent who follows that process and that minimum metric, it's impossible to not make several $100,000 a year. Impossible.